when he said he was more attentive to the bottle than his kids, ooh, that one was a gut punch because I can totally relate with my mom.
Hmm.
And the different topics where you say like the be true to yourself, your chapter two, totally fits with personal values because what I talk to people about is if you don't have a clear understanding of what your top personal values are,
Right.
you will automatically create additional stress whenever you do something that goes against your values. And so, this that chapter was dead on for me. Um, I love this. Are you willing to do what it takes to make the team? And
Right.
I I take this one step further, and the way I think about it is as well as when you realize you have hit rock bottom
Right.
because you have no choice. You got to either you just pick yourself up. You have to, and it's critical. So that one hit. Um, Doing what matters ultimately is the goal. I mean, to me, making a difference is what I've been trying to do for most of my life. So that hits. I mean, I was like, I almost felt like you were writing this for me. Honestly. Um,
Believe it or not, I did write it for you.
well, okay. So see,
All
there
right.
you go. Um,
Because I
oh, go ahead.
No, because one of the things is that's my roadmap. I wanted to make sure that no one else, how they say that make a footprint in the sand and let other people follow. I I want you to understand my journey, but I want your footprints to be alongside of mine or sometimes ahead of mine. I want you to
Yeah,
create your own story, laying out what I've already gone through, just like your book allows people to say, well, a lot of times when things happen to us, we always feel like it only happens to us. And
right.
that's the reason why we can't find the right answers and the reason why we don't look for right answers. And when we do get the right answers, we refuse to accept the right answers.
Yep, that's exactly true. That is so true. Um, I love the fact master it by practicing it. It amazes me how many people um aren't willing to do the repetitions to get better. I mean, it's just that my son, for example, he was so um if he didn't do it right the very first time, he didn't want to do it. And it's like, how, I'd always talk to him about, well, how do you think, these professionals become professionals? They don't, it's just not, yeah, they have the talent, but they have to cultivate that talent.
Right.
And so it's just, it's a common sense thing, but so many people try and get around it. I love the fact that happiness is an inside job. I remember talking to one person who said he can't be happy unless he's in a relationship with someone else. And I thought to myself, this guy is never going to be happy because happiness comes from within.
Right.
Someone else cannot, it does not have the ability to make you happy long term. So it just that one that people take it for granted that, oh, a relationship or whatever. Um, I love your Get a Fight song because I have one. It's the most dorky song you can imagine, but I have a fight song. What's your fight song?
Um, I can't sing it. I can't do it anymore for the simple fact that I always thought that another artist did the song, but once I found out that R. Kelly did I Believe I Can Fly,
Uh-huh.
it's like every time something, I'm going to say this, regardless of whatever he did and whatever he's in prison for, and whatever, that song resonated with me. So I'm going to take ownership and bring it back to me. Instead of following the crowd, I'm going to take my spot as the leader. That song, I Believe I Can Fly. All
All
right.
right. I love it. I love it. Mine, if you go back to the early 80s TV, and it was a ridiculous show, but I loved it. And the song, it always brings me up. Greatest American Hero.
All right.
Do you
All
remember?
right.
Do you remember that
Yeah.
song?
Remember it? Yeah.
Joey
Now,
Scarborough.
now we're both dating ourselves.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just it's funny. My wife and I have been watching I have the complete series DVD set of MASH, and so we've been watching it 'cause she never watched it, and talk about some of these uh, individual characters, actors and actresses who come up on the show that I don't even remember, but they were before they were famous. And so it's so much fun and I keep telling her I said yeah this was this episode was in 1980 or 1977 or 1974 and it's like oh my gosh so because you look at people who um you think oh my gosh what happened to them they look so old and it's like well yeah that was 50 years ago so it's like give them a break um you know don't quit if you still want to play um the suicide thing is a huge part of my story. And so that one resonated very strong. Um, prepare for the worst and there'll be no surprises. I look at it as uh you won't be disappointed. That's
Right.
because you have high expectations and unfair expectations and that doesn't get hit, then it's like, oh, you're disappointed. So I love the nothing to fear but fear itself. Have you know what the definition of fear is, don't you?
Yeah. Feelings of events appearing to be real by yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, fictional evidence appearing real. Yep, that's
Yeah.
exactly it. And I mean, it's just I love to let people know about that because I mean it's true if you can think about that kind of a definition. And the last part you're about your credo. So it's interesting. You've got all these bullet points. The ones that resonated most with me, happiness is a decision. So I'll decide to be happy. That's,
Mhm.
clear. What I perceive is my reality. And so one of the things that I like to talk to people about is the fact that, you know, people have a perception of the world. You don't have to agree with their perception of the world, but you can respect it, and so it's especially nowadays with it's all contentious everything on the political landscape. So I mean it just I wish people could be willing to listen is really
Right.
what it is.
That's the
um
key.
it is. True power comes from compassion and forgiveness. My gosh. uh you know I learned that with my mom.
I learned
Positive
it through
at
my mom.
well, yes, what you told me about your mom. I mean, that's
Yeah.
so, and what she did to me. I mean, not your mom did to me. My mom did to me. It's just if you can forgive, then you can move on. And so, um, difficult roads often lead to beautiful destinations. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey.
It's
I
the
love
journey.
that. Yeah, it's so true. Friendship is important. No matter what is happening in my life, I will make time for friends. And that is so true because for me, my friends are the family I choose, and
Yeah.
so that's so powerful. Fear we just talked about. And dreams without goals are just dreams. I mean, it's so true. People could just say, oh, dream, dream, but you got to start taking action
Right.
to get to those dreams. So,
Yeah.
set a goal. So anyway, bravo, my friend. Bravo.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I think you just hijacked my show.
No, I mean, I wanted to let you know because, when I was reading it, I was like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Because we talked and we connected, but I mean, on a different level reading your book. So,
Yeah. Well, I did tell you, I'm a firm believer. None of us have an original story. The only thing that makes either of our stories original is the cast of characters, our locations, and how we reacted to our own story.
hmm,
That's what
that's
makes it original.
That's cool. I like that. I remember you told me that too, and now that I've read your book, it actually hits even stronger for me.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you're reading my book. I appreciate your feedback. My biggest struggles, matter of fact, one of the questions I'm probably going to ask you is probably the question I should be asking you right now. But I really like to go ahead and get the show started because one, I don't take compliments well. That's one of the things I struggle with, and it's one of the things I get criticized most about. My youngest son once told me in an interview because I kind of downplayed my success, and at 21 years of age, he says, Dad, he says, you got to stop that. And I said, what? He says, you seem to downplay your success. He says, most of your failures are most other people's dreams. He says, you
Oh,
did it, you own it, it's part of your story. He said, just tell your story. And I said, at 21
mm,
years old, I said, kid, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about.
of course. Have,
So
I mean, have any of your kids tried to parent you yet?
my kids have been trying to parent me since they were 13. I don't know anything. Okay. They still try to parent me, and and that's why I said, even with how I teach and how I coach, I always tell people, especially my people that are part of my team, the first thing you need to learn about being part of this world, you got to become a professional listener because we're all walking around pretty much offended about something. We're standing on a platform that's being held up by no one, and we're defending a position that we really don't have. I said
Hmm.
sometimes listening and acknowledging that the conversation that you're having and the story that's being told is real instead of you trying to tell someone how you feel and how it made you feel and whatever. I think sometimes we just need to sit back and listen. I said the
Yeah.
only way that we're going to change is understanding other people's story.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, so that's my thing. So getting kind of deep here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but this is good.
Now this is good. It's probably the best part of my show. All right. So with that said, everything is good. You've got my show notes behind you,
Hmm.
and you know, I'm just going to say, to you, to my audience, welcome to another episode of Talking with Kevin and Son and the People You Should Know. Hi, my name is Kevin McLamore. I'm your show host. I'm a four-time published author, a speaker, and as I've been recently introduced, the Mindset Messenger. This episode is brought to you by RMK Productions and the 10 United Podcast Network. Our mission is through the power of your story is to uplift, give power to your voice, share your story and experiences and perspectives using the framework of teaching, learning, and modeling. My purpose is very simple. I've learned this since the third grade. Hope, helping other people every single day. And so, although that you guys were privileged to normally the back end of the conversation, normally the conversation that happens at the end of the interview, my guest today did the same thing I did to my personal friend and mentor, Les Brown. He hijacked my show. So I hope you enjoyed the impromptu introduction. But I do have to say this: let your feet do what your body is naturally designed to do. If your ankles and knees and back hurt, at the end of the day, the same way mine did, I say go barefoot. Let your feet be pain free. And to learn more about this, go barefoot. Check out Xero Shoes at www.xeroshoes.com or click on the show link at the end of the show. So I'd like to begin. So, whatever your objective is, successful people create a framework around their day to day lives that sometimes not only enhance theirs, they sometimes pour into other people's life, like my guest today. This podcast will reveal the secrets of a highly effective life and how to not let stress get the best of you. For better words, changing the narrative of the way that you view your life from the top down. Today's guest will share with you steps that he took to relieve stress through laughter. My guest is an emotional change artist, if I like to call him. He is funny as crap. He is president of the greatest interior landscaping business in San Francisco Bay Area. In addition, he serves as an adjunct collegiate professor He has helped inspire and teach the concept of marketing to future successful young students. He is also, and I'm going to hate him for this because when our original conversation early August, he had not been able to deliver after 89 attempts his TEDx speak. And I was going to have him do that on the show. But now I can say not only is he a best-selling author, he is also officially a TEDx speaker. And he talks about reducing stress every day. He will share with you how that taking small steps lead to big outcomes. His guests and his story will basically change your life. This show is all about you facing your challenges head on, putting your health ahead of your financial rewards so that you can stay around long enough. And maybe he will share with you the doable steps that inspired him to write his best-selling book, and I'll let him share that with you. My guest is fun, as you have probably figured that out by now. He is a powerhouse of a speaker. If you look online and go to TEDx and look up my guest name, and I'm going to give you that, I said he's a change artist. And the reason why I say he's a change artist, it takes a lot to get to the bottom of the bowl and realize that you want to be at the top. It's a decision that has to be made. He is a gatekeeper of life. His effective tips will not only captivate audiences around the world, but if you listen long enough, he may change your life. Let me welcome Professor Peter Alexander, the mindset change artist, living laughter with stress. How you doing, Peter?
I'm doing fantastic, Kevin. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'm going to do my best to live up to it.
Well, you took over my show. I was not expecting to have any conversations regarding my book, but it was much appreciated. Promoting my book on my own show, so I record everything. So I figured I said the conversations would be great. I wish I could have released our first introduction and to share that, but that's something I'm going to take with me personal because um, friends are so important,
Mhm.
and how our friends come into our life is not by accident. I sincerely believe that God has placed them in your life, in my life, your life.
Yeah.
Corey Portier was lucky enough to be placed in my life, and I consider him now a friend, not a stranger. And you always know when you're doing well when someone says, "I got someone I want you to talk to." All right.
Mhm.
So the success of any business, and that's the way my life has been. My life has been connected from one person to another. Now, the one thing, not only did you hijack my show, you also hijacked part of my story. I always say that if you look in the dictionary and you look at the picture of what's called dysfunctional, my family's picture would show up there. And I would probably be the little kid that's probably drawing on, mustaches on everyone else. But you grew up in an extremely dysfunctional family, you had a stressful childhood. You went through life like everyone else with rocky relationships. You went through a divorce, loss of family members. Conversations of suicide were prevalent in your day-to-day life. And you had some personal ups and downs in your life. Can you do me a small favor, Peter? I should be calling you Pete, not Peter. All right. I apologize, Professor. Please share with us how your story began.
Sure. Well, you're right. Dysfunction is something, and the stress that comes with that is something that's been a lifelong journey for me. Um, it's funny that we both have families where, you know, they define the dysfunctional definition in the dictionary. For me, I like to mention that my parents, they had 9 marriages, 7 divorces, and 1 widowing. But the really unique thing about that, not just the numbers, is that they did a Liz Taylor, Richard Burton get married twice. And what's interesting about that is my parents got married, had my sister, got divorced. My dad got remarried, got divorced. Then my parents got remarried again, had me, got divorced. So I have one sister, 100% blood sibling, but from a different marriage. And so it's like I'm still trying to find some other people who could say, wow, I could do that.
All right. Well,
So
it's always
it,
nice to be the first.
exactly. But the growing up in that total chaos, uh, and a lot of alcoholism, a lot of drug use by family members, but the probably the villain would definitely be my mom and stepfather. Um, I remember the growing up in such dysfunction and some of the complete lowlights of that included when I was 13. um, my mom decided to fix me up with a 46-year-old friend of hers because she thought that I was an angry teenager and I needed to get laid. So that, you know, and that, I know. And I didn't have any kind of intimate relationship with another woman until I was in my 20s. There was just something, I don't know what did me that did for me. At 14, my drunken mom and stepfather encouraged me to slash my wrists. Fortunately, when I saw the blood coming down, I realized what the heck had I done and went ahead and with the neosporin that we had in the drawer and some cotton balls was able to cauterize the wound.
One.
Um, and when I was 22, my stepfather committed suicide and made sure that it was me who would find him. And so that picture in my mind of that when I found him, that's forever embedded in my brain. And needless to say, growing up in that kind of stress, you have to choose how you're going to respond to it. And for me, I took on, people take on the different roles in a family. And I took on they call it the hero role. And basically, what I wanted to do was work hard to get out of that environment. And so, whenever stress came up, which was pretty often, I didn't deal with it. I just kept on going, moving, moving, moving. And so this stress continued to churn inside of me. And it wasn't until I was in my mid 40s and my back was locking up. I had all these different issues going on. But all of a sudden, I started losing weight very rapidly. And at first I thought this is fantastic. I, I was losing weight. I was eating whatever I wanted. I was doing my normal exercise, nothing special. And the weight kept on coming off. So after the 30th pound came off, I decided to have some blood work done. And sure enough, came back. And the doctor told me I got stress induced diabetes. And what's interesting is that I only have one family member, a distant cousin, who also had diabetes. So diabetes didn't run in my family. So, as a classic type A personality, because of what was going on as a child, I basically would, go, 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 work, 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 work. I just said, fine, give me the drugs. I don't have time to deal with this because at the time that this happened, it was one of these perfect storm of stressful activities. My dad was dying and needed his affairs taken care of. My mom, she had major surgery and didn't have enough insurance for the physical therapy that she required. I was running my business. Several employees needed my attention. My kids were small at the time, wanted dad's attention. And, I was heading for a divorce. Needless to say, a lot of things on my shoulders. So I continued to burn the candle at both ends for another 10 years until I ended up in the emergency room 1 hour from being comatose with a severe case of diabetic ketoacidosis. And for the listeners who may not know what that is, basically my body was eating itself alive because of my stress. And at that time, I had gone back to the corporate world And unfortunately, the boss who had talked me into one that I had worked with several companies, he had left and were replaced by a micromanager. This micromanager was just on my case constantly. And I was thinking to myself, my gosh, I'm in my 50s. Why on earth do I have a micromanager now? And so on my after I the emergency room, they transferred me to ICU because my blood sugars were so high that the medical grade glucometers could not read it. They just said high. And so the hospital laboratory had to manually calculate my blood sugars at 8 to 10 times higher than normal. So they put me into ICU. And on my second day in ICU, at about 6 a.m., I get a text from my micromanager boss, and it says, "You have a webinar you need to run at 8 o'clock. What are you going to do about it?" And surprisingly, I didn't have my work laptop in the ICU. I just had my phone. And what did I do? I started trying to reschedule that webinar. And the nurse that was taking care of me at that time, she comes over to me, and they were checking my blood every half an hour, every hour. You don't sleep in the ICU, or you don't sleep in the hospital typically. So constantly poking and prodding me. And my blood sugars had come down. They were still higher than they should have been, but they were more reasonable numbers now. And as I was trying to reschedule that webinar, she takes my blood, and like a 90-degree angle, my blood sugars start skyrocketing again. And she says to me, as a matter of fact, she says, "You realize this is what, pointing at my phone, this is what put you in the hospital bed in the first place." And my friends, some of my family members had told me I was stressing myself out for years. But it wasn't until a person who was pretty much a complete stranger had no skin in the game to tell me, what I was doing wrong. But it finally hit that epiphany moment that I needed. And I realized that I was trading my health for my career. And that's a really bad trade. So I was in the ICU for a couple more days, got out, but that while I was in the ICU, I just contemplated everything. And I decided for the first time in my life, I have to really focus on my health, because if I don't, I'm not going to be around much longer. I won't be able to meet my future grandchildren. So after I got out of the hospital, I went ahead and I resigned. Um, I didn't resign to my micromanager boss. I resigned to my boss's boss, who was somebody else I had worked with at a different company. And I just started trying all these different stress relief tools and techniques. A lot of them helped, some of them didn't. And what I noticed was that not only did my stress go down, but my glucose numbers as a diabetic went down, my weight went down, and my energy level went way, way up. It was as if I had discovered the fountain of youth. And the crazy thing, just to finish with this, Kevin, is that if you saw a picture of me from, let's say, 2008, and you look at me now, other than a little bit more gray hair on my head, I actually look younger now than I did in 2008. That's what stress does to us. It ages us
Right,
rapidly.
right. You're right. One, I'm going to say that I may disagree with you because I saw a picture of you in your latest book, laying in a hospital bed. For someone that looked pretty sick, you're a good-looking sick man. So you turn around. But
Thank
before
you.
we go on with your story, I want to peel back the layers. And the reason why I want to do this, because one, every year in December, I talk about mental health and
Mhm.
suicide rate. and the suicide rate against men is much higher during the Christmas holidays than any other time of year. But also the suicide rate with young people is going out of control. And the reason why, I don't know the answer to why, but I know the conversation needs to be had because after listening to your story and then comparing the earlier conversation for the listeners that were listening, Peter happened to been kind enough, and I don't have to refund him because I always say if you don't like my book, I will buy it back from you and give it to someone that knows how to read. I shouldn't have said it like that, but give it because people don't read. But you read the book from cover to cover. There's a correlation between our lives that pretty much, it runs parallel.
Mhm.
When I originally, before I started my own publishing company, my publisher wanted to talk about, to the demise of the family dynamics. We call it dysfunctional in our family. And I said, my book's all about something positive. I didn't know how dysfunctional my family was until I grew up and I always found humor, just the same way that we'll talk about how you found humor in order to heal. But sports got me out of the predicament. I had a great childhood. Even though
Mhm.
you may read it and says that I had to overcome some stuff and whatever, sports gave me an out. It gave me a reason. I was making a lot of bad decisions before then. And as much as, my father had a great relationship with the bottom, he didn't do the things when I raised the bar for him, he did not achieve. My father was a good man. And I praised my mother for making the decision that was best for her. It wasn't popular for me. When you're a young person, and I want to go back, when you said your mother convinced you to slice your wrist, you had 13 years of age.
Mhm.
You knew right from wrong at that time.
Mhm.
Was there anything running through your head at that time of saying or paint the picture for us of why you went through when you knew right from wrong? What
Well,
was going through your head?
yeah, I didn't like myself. I didn't like my environment. Um, I didn't want I I didn't see things going to get any better. I really at that point I didn't. Um, and so it was when they were egging me on for this and trying to get me to do it. In fact, my stepfather, he handed me a carving knife to do it. And I did, and he dare you and stuff. And so I finally just said, well, I'm going to do it. And I remember when the blood started coming out on my left wrist, and I saw that, and I went, "What the hell am I doing?" And I ran into my room, and I started stabbing my pillow, and I must have stabbed my pillow 30, 35 times, and I was crying the whole time. And at that point, I thought, I'm not going to let them win. I'm not going to let them win. And so after I stabbed my pillow, I went into the bathroom, as I mentioned earlier, grabbed the Neosporin, and I tried to get the blood to stop, um, and was successful. Got some band-aids out, and then just kept to myself, um, for gosh, I don't remember how much long, how long after that. And of course, just like everything growing up, there was never any conversation about it.
You didn't have a neighbor, a friend, brother or sister that sat down that saw signs that said, Pete, do you need to talk? Gave you advice, no mentors at that time?
No. My sister, she was living her own life. She would come, and on occasion she'd come in, and like take me for the weekend to her place. But that was few and far between. Um, my dad. was, around and with his fourth wife. And but you know, the they my my mom, because my mom was one who would make scenes, she kept, a lot of people from doing anything. Um, the police coming to our apartment, our wherever we were living, because she would get into, big fights with her husband. Her third husband would beat her, beat me one time when I tried to break it up. Fourth husband, it was, knockout, drag out, police ensuing visits. Um, but it was always just the two of them, and no one would ever ask, how are you doing? And so for me, I had to be the adult, the only adult. And I lost the opportunity to kind of experience things the way a kid should in most cases, because somebody had to be the adult, somebody had to stay sober. And so for me, it was more, I became very astute at lying, and not lying to family as much as lying to my friends. For example, when I might bring a friend home and my mom or my stepfather was passed out on the couch snoring from a drunken stupor. And, I would make it a lie, like saying, oh, they were working really hard last night and stayed up too late. And they're, catching their rest. Or when uh, bills basically, the priority for what little money we had was booze, cigarettes, and then groceries. That was basically the order. And then, things like rent and utilities were after that. So often our phone would get disconnected because they didn't pay the bill. And so I might have a friend who tried to call me, couldn't get through, said, "Oh, it was a busy signal." And I'd say, "Oh, yeah, my mom or my dad or I tripped over the phone cord back in the days when we had the phones that plugged into the walls, and broke the cable, so that's why you couldn't get through to me." So I was a master at trying to not let people know because I was embarrassed, and I didn't want people to pity me. I just wanted to get out as fast as I could.
So our lives did run parallel. So now we're in a line because I too, and I know this interview is not about me. I had to create a space to where I had to create my own world outside of my own reality. Remember what I
Mhm.
said? Your reality becomes what you focus on. So, my mother had passed on even though she was living and breathing in California. And like I said, to this day, my mom hears me and I know, is your parents still living?
No, both of them passed. My dad passed in 2008, and my mom passed in 2022.
Okay, because I know when I got the first copy, the author's proof of my book, I had to sit down with my mom to let her read the story because I
Hmm.
wanted to let her know and prepare her for what my interpretation of my life was. But you said something that I did not experience, and I think for most men, hearing your story at 16, having your mother give you your first hookup. Um, I don't know what that's like. That's an original story to me. It's probably not original to some of our listeners, but I do know when you have traumatic incidents that happens to you, my life changed because someone was shooting at me and I realized I wanted to live more than I wanted to die. But
Hmm.
I think at the age, if I had experienced what you had experienced, it would have probably devastated me for every relationship that I have had because your first interaction with another human being was not made out of love. It was a decision that was made for you. Um, how did you feel? I mean, at 16 years of age, and this being your first, and the woman, technically is someone's grandmother at 47 years of age. How did that make you feel knowing your parents have arranged a hookup? And I know back in the days you watched television, that's the way it was in tribal communities. Um, but the reality is now is that you're successful in this life now, but when you live and repeat this story, I know it has to muster up or trigger some things in your heart. How does that make you feel? Because someone else is going through the same thing, and I want to know how you came out of it.
Yeah, well, to add a little more color to that. So it was maybe if I was 16, I would have had it different, but I was only 13. So
16, you'd have
and
probably killed it, right?
um I might have, yeah, I might have had a little bit more knowing what I'm supposed to do, but the in addition to the 46-year-old friend doing me in the bedroom, her husband was doing my mom in the living room. And
I did not see that comment.
so it was
I'm
the day
sorry.
after, no, it's okay. The day after, um, I felt like I should feel different, and I really didn't. I kind of felt um, I felt kind of dirty, is how I felt. And then I remember that, so that was on the weekend, and so then I went to school, and I was walking along and thinking, I wonder if I'm the only 13-year-old, 12 or 13-year-old here in class that's actually had sex. And it was just a weird kind of just feeling. And it lasted probably, oh, it was something on my mind fairly frequently for at least a couple of weeks. And I never told anyone until about this. Never even told my closest friends. I found that I was actually more embarrassed than anything else because I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't know who I could talk to about it. And it wasn't until um, I got into adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families back in starting November 7th, 1990. I remember that date very specifically because that was the first time that I remember since I was maybe 4, 5, 6 that I actually felt like somebody else understood me. And that when I started hearing the readings, and kudos to the secretary of that meeting for handing me the writing that's called the solution, because someone else read the problem, and I remember, oh my God, some of that sounds just like me. How do they know this? How do they know this? And then I read the solution, and within 15 minutes of that first meeting, I went, oh my gosh, I'm around other people who can relate to what happened to me. And I credit that program with saving my life, hands down, because not only did I start liking myself and I learned to love myself, but then I got the opportunity to also give back in ways I never thought I could because of the experience I had. And interestingly, what you mentioned, Kevin, about talking with your mom, I remember my old roommate, after I started going to the ACA program, I talked to him about what was coming out for me in the program. And interestingly, fast forward 20 years or so, and he was putting on an event called Ideas from the Heart, uh, you know, hearing stories from what he called everyday heroes. And he knew about my story because I had talked to him when we were roommates. And he asked me to go on stage and talk about it. And I had never talked in public about it, only in the ACA rooms. And I spoke about it many, many times as a speaker in those meetings. But I knew that if I was going to do something in a public forum, I had to talk to my mom about it. And I remember, so this was in 2012. And I remember she was living about 10 miles away. So I knew I had to talk to her about it. We had never talked about anything that happened to me as a kid in that way. And so, this pressure on my shoulders was just intense. And I just said, I got to do it because, this event's going to happen in the next 6 months. I've got to do it. I can't, not let her know. So I remember riding my bike because I figured out maybe I can burn some energy. And I get to her house and, I just, after a few minutes, I say, I need to let you know I'm a speaker at this event and I'm going to talk about what happened to me as a kid. And she's just kind of looking at me. And I said, I'm going to tell the truth about what happened. And I didn't know what she was going to say, but I remember after she thought about it for 10, 15 seconds, she says, well, if it helps other people, I'm okay with it. And this weight, the pressure that was on my shoulders finally went away. And it was such a relief. And I was able to go on stage. It was videoed and I was able to talk about it for the first time in a public forum. And I really appreciated that. It's part of the forgiveness that I have for her. Primarily the forgiveness is because she was a wonderful grandmother to my kids. So as a father, I could forgive her, even though as a parent, she was horrendous. So
And
yeah,
that's the nice thing about your story. And I hope people are listening to this story because we all mature at different stages. When we get on stage and we talk about our why, those of us that present the why as trying to discover, what the easiest thing to do in life, and that's what you make your living, that's not really your why. Your why is defining what your purpose is. And like someone told you, is that tell your story and it makes a difference. My grandmother said, for me to do something that people would stand in line to pay to hear my story.
mm,
And the first chapter in my book is owning your own truth, which you
mhm,
just did right there. And it's hard to move forward. A lot of times, depending on what's taught and what's caught, we repeat the cycle. You're married, you're father, you've got kids. How did you avoid repeating that cycle?
mm. I wish I could say that I didn't repeat anything. I mean, Carl Jung talked about, the shadow effect, which is parts of our personality that we don't like. Um, and usually those certain personalities that we don't like, inevitably something gets passed on to our kids. And so, and we notice it more because why? We don't like our shadow. And so, um, but what I did primarily, other than unfortunately getting divorced. But that it wasn't in the same context as what I grew up in. My wife and I just stopped talking, and we went our, separate. We just stopped being friends. And so, um, it was time to split. And I think it was the right thing, absolutely the right thing to do. And my kids understand that now. But what I did when they were smaller in their formidable years, whenever I was faced with something going on with either my daughter or my son, and I wasn't exactly sure how to handle it, believe it or not, what I would do is I would say, how would my mom or my dad have dealt with this? And the majority of the time, I would do just the opposite. And that's why I have a really good relationship with both kids. Um, they know that I support them, and I'll tell them the truth about, things when they need to. I can be very stern when I need to be, but I'm also very loving and supportive, and I listen. And you and I talked about that earlier, that the power of listening, because so often people feel alone because they don't think anyone's listening to them. And so
Right.
whenever it's something that's really important, that we're, it's a matter of turning everything else off and giving 100% attention. And, unfortunately, with our phones these days, especially with the younger generations, but, for us as well, whenever we're talking with someone who's important to us in our lives, and let's say we get a text or a ping of some sort on our phone, and we check that phone while the other person's talking, you know, subconsciously, what are we telling the other person? We're telling them that whatever's on our phone is more important than what the other person has to say. So I make it a point that, like, for example, like, our conversation right now, my phone's off, my email's off, my pings are off, unless the house catches on fire. I'm 100% present in our conversation. And when we have the opportunity to do that with others and allow them to feel heard, that can have a ripple effect for them, especially as we were talking about, with the suicide, being able to listen. We don't have to say, "Oh, I'm sorry," and, I sympathize with you. No, they just need to be heard. And then, and what I've learned, not only with my kids, but with friends when they've been down and stuff, is just say thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Thank you. And I thank you for sharing. Um, I have a very strong circle of friends, which you are now in that circle, and my friends get things done. I'm a big fan of a guy by the name of Trevor Noah, and you know, Annie Duke, which I'm begging to have her on my podcast because I sit there in my book and I say don't quit. She made $4 million last year teaching people how to quit. So
Hmm.
I want to know how I missed that. But the conversation where I'm going with this is that knowing what you went through your childhood. Um, and I didn't hear you mention a lot about friends. And the one thing that I had in my circle is being part of the Mighty Teddies. I had 60 something odd friends that wore the same uniform, that had the same belief every Friday night that I had, that were in the trenches with me. That gave me a sense of strong family values because I sincerely believe if everyone took the basic lessons of sports and lived their life like that, teamwork, loyalty, compassion, overcoming hardships, and so forth, I think life would be much better. We would deal with it. Everyone doesn't get a trophy. But I know an issue with trust. And when I was listening to Trevor Noah and Simon Sinek talk about friends. Simon Sinek said something that stuck with me that I remembered. And I said, I'm going to bring this up when I talk to my good friend Pete. He says, when you talk about friends, he says, we don't build trust by offering help. We build trust by asking for
Mm, hmm hmm
it. Do you agree?
I would agree 100%. It's one of the hardest things that for me to do as well. So I have to be in I don't want to call it a dire strait, but I have to be really down for me to say, pick up the phone and actually, reach out to someone. But I will do it when I need to. But I have to feel like whatever I'm doing is not working at this point. So I need to have a conversation. And I was lucky enough to have one friend from my childhood and one friend from my high school days um, that I could, at least commiserate with. Um,
Right. You can mention them by
and
names.
yeah,
You can
yeah.
mention
Well,
them.
so one John Martin, who my longest, oldest friend in terms of years. We've been friends for it will be 55 years very shortly, and so he and I met in kindergarten, and even after I started moving because you know with the alcoholism and other dysfunction, we were moving all over the place. Um, Somehow I was able to maintain a friendship with him and, be able to take buses or other public transportation to be able to see each other. Um, and then when I was in high school, I had another friend, Ken Bell, who sadly passed away uh, 12 years ago. Um, he and I were like, it's funny, people would refer to us as Laurel and Hardy. um, it just we both into a lot of humor, and and he was the short blonde kid. I was the tall brunette, and
Mhm.
and it was that routine. It was pretty funny, and uh, it's interesting. I was on the football team. When you talk about having sports as your go-to. I mean, I used to my savior sport was actually watching the Oakland Raiders back in the day. That Sunday afternoon or Sunday morning was the one time, other than Halloween, where I could
Mhm.
forget what was going on.
Right.
Um, and I tried playing football when I was first a freshman, and I got beat to death. I really did because I was the tallest person on the team, and I actually could catch the football no matter what. But because I was the tallest one on the team, they decided to make me a lineman. I suggested why don't I be a tight end, and made me a lineman, gave me pads that I couldn't raise my arms any farther than this.
Right.
So unless they threw the ball at my numbers, I couldn't catch it. Um, and decided I'd come home and I could barely move. And I just said, I'm not enjoying this. So I picked back up the tennis racket and I played high school tennis for the rest of my high school career. Um, but never, it wasn't a camaraderie, because unfortunately, tennis, unless you play doubles, it's not a team sport, it's an individual sport.
Right.
Um, so I didn't get that sense of camaraderie and teamwork that you experienced as you were growing up. And it's interesting because my both my kids, my daughter was or is my daughter is, but she still is a record holder in track and field for her high school, and so she would knew how to push herself, still does, and is got a great career. And my son played high school tennis and enjoyed it, did well at it. Um, but now he's into more on the team sports as it relates to video games, which, you
Okay.
know, he's very good at that too, and has been on camera. He's not shy with the camera when they're videoing him or recording him playing against his opponents, and so he's not camera shy with that. He's great at it. So he's found his niche as well.
Well, you know something, I love the fact that when you talk about your kids, there's a different expression on your face. You light up. I see all 32 teeth, and I appreciate you smiling while you still have all of them. I'm going to the dentist after this interview today, so hopefully I'll have all 30 of my teeth. I've lost a couple. But well, before I move on, because I want to talk about your book, I want to talk
Mhm,
about how you manage stress through laughter. You're also a very successful stand-up comedian,
mhm.
along with everything else. I mean, this would be an 8-hour show if I talked about everything that you did. But I do want people to know how to get in touch with you. If you don't mind, how can people reach you? How can people get a copy of your book? And how can people get access to you to have you speak? And the one thing I like about this interview, I think after listening to your TEDx speech, I still think this interview went up to your TEDx speech. So I was a little jealous, but now I don't feel so bad now that I heard your story.
Well, I appreciate that, Kevin. And like I told you before, I much prefer a conversation. I much prefer being able to give a presentation when I'm able to react to the audience. If the
Right.
audience laughs or somebody asks a question or makes a comment, I can respond to it in the moment. With a TEDx, they pound it into you that you have to memorize every word, and so
Right.
that's a whole different experience. But for me, the best way to reach me would be through my website, petealexander.com, petealexander.com, because that one has my TEDx talk. It's got my a link to my book. It's got connection how you can reach out to me on social media or email. So that's probably the best one. And yeah, I've given a lot of different presentations at conferences as well as at organizations. And it's really all about, different ways that people can reduce their stress. And I take people through different activities so that they can experience it firsthand, including, if depending on what the audience would like. Boy, my book has over 120 different activities. So I pull from what I think will be most effective for a group, depending on what their background and stressors are, because I always like to find out ahead of time what are the most likely stressors that the audience is currently dealing with in their
Right.
professions.
Yeah. So, um, to the audience, this young man is a much better man than I'm ever going to be. When I first had our conversation and I wanted him to do his TEDx speech here, he had made 89 attempts and had been rejected 89.5 times in order to give a TEDx speech. So we were supposed to do this interview long before, but I went on vacation and I think he canceled on me because he was doing his TEDx speech and didn't want to tell me, thinking I would be crushed. So he waited until I found the video and I was crushed because he didn't tell me. But he did an amazing TEDx speech. Um, this question is prelude to the question I wanted to ask you. before this, but um, my whole life is about optimism. All right.
Hmm.
Um, in business and in life, how important is being optimistic to both men and women? And do are men more optimists or are women?
Mm.
What's your take on that?
Wow, I've never been asked that before. I honestly don't think it's a gender thing, Kevin. I actually think it's what our background, what our perception of the world is. That really is what defines it. And so I believe, that when we, so I'm a big believer in energy, and we attract back whatever like energy we send out to the universe. And so I'll give an example. Let's say we're running late for an appointment and we start stressing about that appointment. Oh, we're going to be late. We're going to be late. Well, what ends up happening usually? We're going to get the red lights, aren't we? We're going to hit every red light. However, if we send out a positive energy, like you get a green light, what I like to do, a perfect example actually is there's a bridge about 10 miles from where I live, but if I have to get to the airport, I got to cross over that bridge. Well, that bridge is a drawbridge. And if that bridge decides to open, we're going to have a delay of at least an hour because the traffic backs up. And so every time I go over that bridge as it's open, I say, I'm sorry, as it's closed but open to car traffic, I say, thank you, thank you, thank you. I send out that positive energy because I want to attract back that like positive energy. So that's something that we have to think about is if we focus on the negative, we constantly are looking at the negative, we're only going to attract back negative outcomes, negative other people, because like energy attracts like energy. So I like to try and surround myself with people like yourself that are positive, that have, the energy that resonates well with me. And another thing that I like to recommend for everyone is to have gratitude for what you have right now, because that is a wonderful stress reliever. My wife and I, at the end of each day, we always ask each other, "What are you grateful for?" And I'll always start when she asks me, I'll always start with, "I'm grateful for my health," because all else is secondary. And the reason I say that is because if we think about it, and if we think about the last time we were really, really sick with the flu, etc., if we're honest with ourselves, we probably didn't have any energy other than to lie in bed. And when all we do is lie in bed and can't do anything else, we're no good to our career, our business, our loved ones, etc. So I always start with, I'm grateful for my health. And I also recap the little things during the day that I really am grateful for. And obviously, one of those will be this wonderful conversation that you and I have had, because
Oh, thank
it's going to be
you.
a highlight. So
Thank you.
I just recommend to the listeners to have gratitude. It does, when you have gratitude, you send out that positive energy that'll attract back positive energy.
All right. And I'm learning as I'm listening because I don't do well with compliments, and I appreciate that. So I'm learning to say thank you, and I teach it, but a lot of times I don't practice it when it comes to myself. Um, Humor.
Mhm.
You talk about stress, you talk about techniques, and stress is it's just a natural response to the pressures we have to deal with. And it triggers a lot of different factors in our life. It crosses over life's events, relationships, our financial problems, like you said, health and illness, our work situations, either to stay, go, or just maintain whatever. Talks about our cognitive thoughts, our sleep habits, lack of or too much sleep or wanting more vacations, whatever, or even our personal beliefs? Is it our faith, like you said, energy? Is it which side of the fence that we decide to put our emotions on and whatever? And all these are our emotions. Um, you find humor in all of this. So run us through. So we talked enough about stress. We talked enough about the things that brought us to this point and whatever. And it's always more important when you talk about the shadow. And the answer to every problem with the shadow is where the light comes from. And you use humor as that light. So when you shine light on the shadow, what happens? It all disappears.
Right.
All right. So how does humor take us through humor and all of this? Because we're all dealing with some crap during the course of a day.
Absolutely. Well, the thing about it is that on the average person, when they were a child, probably laughed, chuckled, smiled, whatever you want to call it, at least 100 times a day. Unfortunately, as adults, if we're lucky, we will smile, chuckle, laugh 5 times a day. The problem is that we forget that we can laugh at anything. And as when we were kids and silly things would make us laugh. And as adults, we feel like, oh, we have to have a reason to laugh, because if not, people are going to judge us. They're going to think we're crazy. Well, the reality is, and this is the great thing. When I was trained in laughter yoga, which started back in 1995 by a Dr. Kataria, laughter has been clinically proven by over 30 studies all over the world about helping to heal people. And the way that that happens, whenever we have a hearty laugh, and you know this, Kevin, you have a hearty laugh for at least 5, 6 seconds. You know how great that feels? Well,
Right.
the what happens is if we're laughing, having a hearty laugh for 5 to 6 seconds, our bodies release positive endorphins that give us the benefits, the health benefits, whether it's stress relief, reducing our blood pressure, etc. The crazy thing is, as smart as our bodies are, they don't know the difference between a real and a simulated laugh. Only knows that we're laughing. So if we just try to laugh off something instead of focusing on the negative. So we were talking earlier about red lights. Okay. So if you're running late and all of a sudden, classic red light hits, okay. Can you do anything about that red light other than drive more recklessly and try and blow through it or, whatever? Um, you can't. So instead of getting all stressed out, try laughing. And if you're in your car and you think somebody's going to look at you in your car and go, oh, that person's crazy. Well, how do you know that they don't think you're listening to a funny podcast or you're talking on the phone with somebody, etc.? The thing is, if we just do a forced or simulated laugh, we still get those positive endorphins. So, like I did on my TEDx talk, and I'll do it here for this podcast, this is a great example because it happens so frequently. So, imagine that you just received a challenging, a negative, whatever you want to think about it, text or email message from a person or organization that you respect. And imagine how that would make you feel. So let that sink in for a couple of seconds. Take a deep breath in. And now with the other hand, and do it with me, Kevin, with the other hand, go ahead and point at that imaginary message. And just let's go ahead and laugh for 10 seconds like this. That's a good one. How do you feel?
I feel great. Unfortunately, I feel this way all the time.
Well, exactly. So because you weren't, it was, it wasn't but something challenging you, but typically if we do a laugh for, let's say 10 seconds, we'll feel lighter, more energized, and better. And
I
so,
agree.
it's just a matter of there's always different ways to look at a situation. And I'm not talking about where you're going to just, let's say be at a funeral and laugh at the dead body, let's say. No, those there's certain situations that,
When you come to my
you know,
funeral, it's going to be a party.
okay. Well, and that's,
Yeah,
and that's actually true. It should be a celebration of life.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, absolutely. That's how I look at it too. If I
yeah.
don't want anybody all down. Just let be grateful for the opportunity to have met and shared some fun times. The reality is if we can get into the habit of trying to laugh it off and not feel like we're being disrespectful or anything, it's different because we're not supposed to laugh. As adults, we're told, oh, okay, we're supposed to only laugh if it's a funny joke or a
Right.
funny cat video or something like that. No, we don't. We can, and I'll give a perfect example of how I did this before I even learned all about laughter. When I was in college, I was working my way through college as an assistant manager at Radio Shack. For those of you who remember what Radio Shack used to be.
You're so dating yourself.
Oh, I know, I know. So and back in the day back in the day when you had to handwrite every receipt. Um, so before the internet, the busiest shopping days of the year was the Saturday before Christmas was number one.
Yeah.
The Friday after Thanksgiving was number two. And number three was Christmas Eve. Number four was Christmas, the day after Christmas, because people were returning stuff.
Well, now it's
So
Halloween.
Halloween's a big one too.
Yeah.
Um, but so this was the day after Thanksgiving, and there were four of us working, our whole staff. We were buried in customers. We had four or five in a row at the counter. And so this guy comes up to me and he says, I'm looking for a part for my television. He starts describing it. And mind you, at this time, I had a little over 3 years of experience at Radio Shack. So I was the senior person. I knew all the stuff. And so he's describing what he needs. And he's not describing it very well. So I say, okay, let me show you something. And I take him over to the cable components and I point out, this is what I'm hearing you describe. Is this what you mean? And so I point at this thing, and I kid you not, the guy looks at it and he says, I can't believe Radio Shack employees are so stupid. And I remember doing this and walking away because normally I would, you know, get into
Yeah.
an argument with somebody like that back then. And so I laughed it off and I went and I started helping the next person in line. He comes over as I'm helping the next person and he interrupts me. And so I interrupt him back and I look him right in the eyes and I say, I'm sorry, I'm too stupid to answer that question.
Huh. That's
And
all right.
so he starts swearing at me and I smile at him and I say, it takes one to know one.
Yeah. It is hard to be upset with someone that's laughing or making
Yeah,
you laugh. So,
exactly.
so you have an amazing book. I've gotten through about 80% of it. I
Oh,
haven't read
thank
the
you.
whole thing, but I appreciate you reading mine. There's no good excuse other than I'm not going to even say how many other books I have to read every single week for interviews. You have a story that definitely needs to be told. You present yourself very well. I think we pull back a couple layers of your story that have been untold. so far. And I appreciate you being as open as you have been and allowed yourself to be vulnerable for our listeners. And I'm hoping our listeners find themselves in a space where they're not trying to say that, I'm talking to someone that has a very successful life, but they look at the fact that this is how he overcame. And both of us experienced similar things in our childhood. And we also have to realize until we're 16 years of age, when you're a child, you really have no control over your life until you get your driver's license and you start making decisions independently. And that's when you start to be hypercritical about yourself. Allow yourself to make some mistakes, allow yourself to overcome those mistakes and learn, because that's what life's about. And be prepared for the one day when you discover where your why is at and what your true purpose. It will come. We are all energy. We're all the same human beings. And we all have original stories, we think. But look at the people that have stories that's similar to yours and look at how they came out on the other side and then make your story original based on the lessons and the things that my guest, Professor Peter Alexander, has shared with us. I have couple more questions to ask you real quick, but I want to ask you again, how do people get in touch with you and where can they buy your book?
Sure. Just go to PeteAlexander.com, PeteAlexander.com. It has the link to the book. You can get it on either a printed version, the electronic Kindle version, or it's on audiobook as well.
All right, and the title of your book is Listen to Your Day, Fast and
Light,
Easy, and Lighten Your
lighten
Day.
your day. Lighten
When
your day.
you say, what's the title of your book? I don't
That's
want to
right.
mess it.
Lighten your day, fast, easy, and effective stress relief. And lighten is a 7-letter acronym for the 7 areas of our life that stress us out. L is for our livelihood or our career. I is it's imagination or our conscious mind, only 5% of our brain, but it's where our inner critic lies. G is for genius, our unconscious mind, where real change happens. H is for our health, physical health that we talked about earlier. Um, T is for time, because time and health are our 2 most precious assets. E is our environment, and N is our network of relationships. So
All
lighten your
right.
day.
That's how I came up with hope. Everything has an acronym to it. Way
Yep.
to go. So, Pete, you give a lot of speeches.
Mhm.
You are now mentoring people in life. You're coaching people through life. You're talking about marketing strategies and how to build successful businesses and how to build a successful life reflects on your business. You're the ultimate optimist. You are a good friend. You're someone that not only trusts yourself, but can be trusted. You're a gift to this world. Now, I want to ask you, I want you to use your imagination. At the end of one of your speeches or your presentations, it could be the TED Talk. If you were to put a post-it note on the forehead of every person that's listening to this podcast or listen to one of your speech or been coached by you, and if you can leave one message for our audience, all right, you got a post-it note. What would you write on that post-it note?
I would say don't trade your health for your career. That that's the post-it note for sure.
All right, and drop the mic on that one. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for tuning in and listening. I also want to remind you that if you're in the same situation that I've been, where your ankles, knees, and back hurt at the end of the day, do what I do. Allow your feet to be designed the way that they should be. Go barefoot. And if you want to know more information about going barefoot, go to www.xeroshoes.com. Click on any of the videos. My good friend Stephen Sashin will tell you just the benefit of going Xero Shoes. I mean, believe it or not, it changed my life. It took me 7 days
Mm.
after I started going from a shoe that was elevated to flat foot. But I will tell you, when my knees stopped hurting, on my back, and I didn't feel tired at the end of the day, I say, just like anyone else says, it's got to be the shoes. And it had to be the shoes. So, with that said, keep this in mind. To grow, you must make some mistakes, where both my guests and I have. To have confidence, you must have to adjust your anxieties. To forgive yourself, you must hold yourself accountable. To learn, you have to unlearn some stuff. And to exist, you have to show up as more. Understanding the power of your words. Notes from me, your mindset messenger. So if you like what you've heard, if you want to get in touch and learn a little bit more about Peter and all the things that he's doing some great things on this end, go to our YouTube page at RMK Productions and Network. And if you like what we've done, like, comment, or share this video, you can find it. It's going to be here around here long after Peter and I are both gone. And I know if we touched you in any type of way, make a comment. And if you are really touched, please, please buy his book. Not only something tangible to hold in your hand, but he has a very pleasant voice. Buy it on Kindle, on Audible, and listen to it too. It's a book that needs to be shared. So again, Pete, you always have a seat at this table. You're more than welcome. And if you have anyone that's like-minded like yourself that would has a story to be told and want to share it, I would be more than happy. I would thank Corey Portier for making this introduction to my growing list of new friends that people have a high call to action. And since I brought that up, I want to say this to you. I want to also add you to a list of successful people, the 100 successful people I have in my life and their secrets to their success. And we've shared a lot of nuggets here, but I do have one question to ask you. And I said I had a couple, and I've asked this from several of my guests, not all of them. But if you had one ask, and what I mean by one ask, if you had one dream, one wish to come true, and the reason why I'm asking this, I think I share this story with you, is that um, God, I don't want to even get emotional. Let me back up a little bit. My friends are not the type of friends that basically drive by an accident. They stop and help. They have a high call to action. You're one of those people that has a high call to action. I've had 6 people to this day that have answered this question, and 6 strangers has addressed and granted them their life's wish. If you had one ask, and I want you to think about it and make your ask big, ASK, what would that ask be?
Mhm.
In a moment of silence, we're still on while
Yeah.
he's thinking.
Yeah, we're still
Yeah.
I think, you know, dreaming big would be to donate a significant sum of money to the adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional family organization. That program, it's a nonprofit, adultchildren.org. That's the website. The ability to help people peel back the onion and not feel like they're alone, that they experienced the dysfunction of the growing up in a terribly dysfunctional family, that is not something that is you do solo. You have others who understand how you feel. And I think if more people could experience that and the benefits of that, they could really learn to, like for me, not only learn to like myself, but to love myself and realize that, there are other people that you could talk to who understand how you feel. And the only reason I found out about it was because I was in a men's group at the time. And each quarter we would put a goal out. And one of the other members of my men's team at the time was a recovering alcoholic. And he became aware of the children program. He didn't go to it himself, but he knew some of the stuff that was going on from my background. And he said, "You ought to go." And I said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, whatever. No, no, no." And So finally, I made a goal. I said, okay, I'll go to one meeting. And that one meeting did happen on November 7th, 1990, and it forever changed my life. I would not have known about that program had he not told me about it. And so, if more people can be aware of that program and its benefits, I think a lot more people could find their happiness.
You know, education is not designed to make you comfortable.
Mhm.
Education is designed to make you think. So, to our listeners and everyone that shares this, I want you to remember this or think about this. We're in an election period right now, 50 something odd days. If you look at the amount of money that's being raised in order to support a candidate on either side, and I'm not picking a side, whatever, but there's $1 billion that has been spent in order for us to hear a story that most of us don't need to hear, or stories that won't be told. There's multiple millions of dollars that have been spent on programs that will no longer exist. But if you think of where the real power is with the people, if you took that same money out of political campaigns and put it into programs like yours, we wouldn't have to ask. Just think
Yes,
about it. All right.
that
And there will be a child or children that will get the help before someone makes a bad decision in the month of December, or an adult that needs the help, a male adult, a male child, a female child that's not sure about their place in life, that could change a decision and change a life and allow one of those children to be the next most successful podcaster, the most successful coach, teacher, musician, actor, you name it. All we want is hope, helping other people every day.
mhm.
So, with that said, my grandfather always said, when you get to a place in life that you can help someone else, he said it's your duty to do so. He said, reach one, teach one. And with that said, Peter, Professor Peter Alexander, thank you for not only being a good friend, but thank you for your gift to this world. And thank you for coming on talking with Kevin and Son. And with that said, we'll fade to black and we're out. Thank you, Peter.